member of the progressive group Fuse Washington provided the Rachel Maddow Show with exclusive audio of House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes speaking at a fundraiser in Spokane, Washington last week for the number 4 House Republican Cathy McMorris Rodgers. In the recording, Nunes and McMorris Rodgers say that Rod Rosenstein cannot be impeached, but only because it would imperil the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. Said he should not be impeached. Nunes also spoke about the importance of protecting President Trump.
The Senate only has so much time. You want them to drop everything and not confirm the Supreme Court justice, the new Supreme Court justice. So that's part of why I don't think you're not getting from, like I've said publicly, Rosenstein deserves to be impeached. So I don't think you're going to get any argument from most of our colleagues. The question is the timing of it right before the election.
That's what the Senate. So the Senate has to start.
The Senate would have to start. The Senate would have to drop everything they're doing and start with impeachment on Rosenstein. And then you take the risk of not getting Kavanaugh convicted. So it's not a matter of the name was like Rosenstein. It's a matter of timing. So therein lies, so it's like your classic catch-22 situation where, we're at this what puts us in such a tough spot. If Sessions won't unrecuse and Mueller won't clear the president, we're the only one, which is really the danger. That's why I keep, and thank you for saying it, by the way, we have to keep all these things. We have to keep the majority. If we do not keep the majority, all of this goes away.
And that's the voice of Devin Nunes. McMorris Rodgers had no comment on that recording. Nunes' office did not return calls seeking a response. Joining us now, member of the Judiciary and Armed Services Committees, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. Senator, thanks for being with us, and thanks for your patience during the Steve Miller Band conversation. Let's talk about what you just heard right there. It's not news that Devin Nunes believes Rod Rosenstein should be impeached. He said it publicly. The Freedom Caucus introduced the idea of impeaching Rod Rosenstein as Deputy Attorney General. House Speaker Paul Ryan came out the next day and said he did not support that, the impeachment of Rod Rosenstein. But what Nunes is effectively saying there is, we'll put it to the side for a moment while we get Kavanaugh on the bench, but then we're coming back to the idea that Rosenstein should be impeached. What does that tell you, and how serious do you take that?
Well, first, it tells me that the Republican leadership is putting a priority on the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh.
Right.
He's the critical swing vote. If the special counsel issues a subpoena and it goes to the United States Supreme Court, he may well be the one to determine whether the president has to comply with that subpoena. So this strategy is really the most craven and brazen kind of politics in its approach to undermining the rule of law. And the second point to be made here is that the reason for retaining the Republican majority is simply to protect the president against potential consequences that may involve other subpoenas, uncovering other wrongdoing. This culture of corruption is so pervasive. Wilbur Ross, other members of the cabinet, the president himself, violating the emolument clause by taking all kinds of foreign benefits and payments. We have sued the president. 200 members of Congress have joined my lawsuit. And it is really unparalleled in American history.
As you look ahead at the dominoes that could fall if somehow Rosenstein were impeached, is that to put somebody in place, do you believe, who could then fire Bob Mueller? Is that the ultimate goal here?
That's a really key question, because people look at the special counsel and say his position is critical, which it is, but ultimately the one responsible for approving all of the potential indictments, all of the budget, all of the personnel of the special counsel is in fact the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. So in firing him or impeaching him or unrecusing the Attorney General to fire him is really at the core of what I think this strategy is.
Senator, I have a question for you. So Nunes is obviously known as somebody who hates the investigation, who is cast out on it. But seeing the number 4 House Republican echo his comments, Cathy McMorris Rodgers, kind of echoing his sense of the strategy, was new to me. And I wonder if you take that to mean that the full House leadership is actually secretly behind this plan to impeach the Deputy Attorney General?
In my view, the Republican leadership is ambivalent. It knows what the right thing to do here is. It needs the grit and backbone to stand up and really uphold the rule of law. And that applies to Brett Kavanaugh as well, because right now, the Republicans are engaged in a conscious effort to hide and conceal documents that are necessary to evaluate Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. They have not only limited the scope of the documents to exclude all the relevant paper and communications involving Brett Kavanaugh's service in the Bush White House as staff secretary, but they have also turned over the screening process to a team of Republican lawyers headed by a lawyer who was, in fact, Kavanaugh's deputy in the Bush White House, and now is serving as a lawyer to a number of people in the Bush administration or formerly in the Bush administration, like Steve Kavanaugh. And they are, in effect, cherry-picking, pre-screening, sanitizing documents so that we have now filed a Freedom of Information request. We, the Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee, we did it yesterday because it's the last resort.
You know, Walter, getting back to Devin Nunes and what Devin Nunes' strategy is going against Rosenstein, you know, even the White House sources are telling reporters that the White House considers Nunes and the Freedom Caucus's attacks on Rosenstein to be a joke. They know it's not serious. They know it's not going anywhere. And yet you just wonder why Paul Ryan is allowing it to continue, and as people are now looking about and trying to figure out what Paul Ryan's legacy is going to be. Right now, if this continues, his legacy is allowing a guy to destroy the intel community's bipartisanship, historically bipartisan nature, and secondly, allowing members to run around and try to provide cover for Vladimir Putin by destroying an investigation that looks into how Putin's trying to undermine American democracy. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah, the White House considers it a bit of a joke that Nunes is acting this way, but it's not a joke. We used to be able to have a consensus in Congress that people were going to rise above partisanship at times, like when we got attacked by Russia. And I'd love to turn it to the senator, because I don't quite, I mean, you remember the times when there would be Republicans and Democrats would say, okay, this transcends our partisan differences, let's figure it out. Other than Bob Corker, who's a great man, and Jeff Flake, who are honest, are there Republicans in the Senate who are talking to you and saying, maybe we ought to move this along? I know that Mark Warner has had some success on the Intelligence Committee doing that. Is there some hope there?
I always have hope. That's the reason I go to work in the mornings. But I am deeply disappointed in the Republican leadership in the Senate as well as the House. They have really collapsed like rusty lawn chairs. And the real crying need now is to return to that kind of bipartisan consensus, because we face an ongoing threat. It's not only the special prosecutor looking at Putin and the potential conspiracy involving a Trump campaign in the past and obstruction of justice, which is unfolding right before our eyes in real time. It's also looking forward at what Putin is doing right now. The pervasive and ongoing threat to our democracy is what's really at stake.
Yeah, they've currently hacked right into the Florida voting rolls, too. And it's just amazing to me that both parties don't want to say, let's stop Russia from hacking our election system.
They are saying the right things, but what's missing is action. And that will require Republicans really standing up to be counted, as they did during Watergate.
Senator Richard Blumenthal, thank you so much for being on Morning Joe today. Still ahead, in 2016, she was booted out of a luncheon for heckling Donald Trump. Now she's on course to become the first Muslim woman in Congress. Rashida Tlaib joins us next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.